Hi, I'm Heather McLean from the Alliance Against Northern Pass, and today we're going to be interviewing Dr. McLaren, Dr. Campbell McLaren from the North Country. He is a full-time emergency room physician, and today he would like to talk to us about the electromagnetic radiation that can be emanated from a project such as the Northern Pass, and how those health effects and other things can affect people and cause problems such as leukemia. And so today we'll just start with introducing you and asking you how you were interested in doing this in the first place, how this came to your attention and why it became so important for you to talk about it.
I'll be pleased to. 2 years ago, PSNH quietly introduced a couple of their employees into the various townships, talking about the new transmission line that was proposed, that would be essentially bringing a high voltage DC line down from Quebec through northern New Hampshire. The first 40 miles would have to be new right of way, and then down the rest down to a converter station at Franklin. And this alerted us in the township of Easton and Franconia, particularly, as well as other towns up north in Colebrook, about the possible effects of what this line might do for us. As a physician, and I work full-time, I am concerned about community health. I was the town physician in Easton, and this concerned me. This was being pushed through very quietly and surreptitiously, and of course made us somewhat suspect of the whole project. Now, electromagnetic fields occur when electric current just moves, flows. And currently going down the right-of-way in northern New Hampshire is a high voltage AC line, and the effects of the extra low frequency electromagnetic field became of great interest to me. First of all, the definition of extra low frequency puts it right at the bottom of the spectrum of frequencies, so much lower than X-rays, imaging, microwaves, your cell phones. Very low frequency. The concern here, however, is that extra low frequency should not make us relax and think that perhaps it's not so bad. It's in fact extremely dangerous and threatening to us, because extra low frequency EMF is absorbed by our skin. We are very permeable to it, and we cannot shield ourselves. We can't put up lead. We have to distance ourselves from it. We have to move away from it. Now, as it comes off the line, and the HVAC line currently, it falls off pretty rapidly at about 500 feet. Now, it's measured in something called milligauss, and what all the studies have looked at with the health effects are 2 to 4 milligauss densities of electromagnetic field. I looked at the studies. I spent a significant amount of time, and for decades it's been researched, decades.
Yeah. And denied.
And denied. Until 1992, when the government put in 42 million and almost up to 60 million dollars into the RAPID study. That was a study that the acronym I'm just going to make sure of, which is the...
We're complete with cheat sheets.
Yeah, is the Research and Public Information Dissemination System. And this study was asked to rigorously look at all the evidence, use rats, use the lab, look at people studies, and this was peer-reviewed. It was rigorously peer-reviewed.
Okay.
And I think 1992 it started. I believe it was 97 or maybe 99 when it was finally published. And the strongest evidence for ill effects from extra low frequency EMF was for children, and an increased incidence of leukemia.
Okay.
Now this EMF, extra low frequency, damages the cells in the chromosomes and the DNA. Maybe influences calcium fluxes. There are other effects, bad effects postulated. The child with rapidly dividing cells with thin skull plates is far more sensitive. Now, this study was less strong with female miscarriages, with neurodegenerative disorders, with Alzheimer's. So I focused on, essentially, because I feel it's extremely important, children, and the fact that many studies have shown a doubling of the incidence of leukemia in an environment of 2 to 4 milligauss, and a lot of studies have looked at that.
2 to 4 milligauss. Now, what does that mean?
That's the way they measure the magnitude of the magnetic field.
Okay.
And I brought a little meter myself, and in fact went to a local school up in my territory, where the right-of-way impinges on the games field and also part of the structure.
Okay.
A lot of the studies looked at 300 feet.
Right.
And it showed 2 to 4 milligauss was connected with a doubling of the chance of getting leukemia with children.
So is that a certain distance? Or is
at
that
300 feet.
At 300 feet. Okay.
Now, one study, the Draper study, showed, plotted, he looked at, Professor Draper, Oxford, University in England, looked at, I believe it was 29,000 cases of leukemia. 29,000.
Wow.
And plotted them.
Okay.
This was over the years. And he found that by plotting them and knowing the location of the transmission lines, that there was a 70% increase in the chance of leukemia for children living within 600 feet of the right-of-way. And as it went out to 1,000 feet, it dropped to 20% increased chance. Now, that was an outlier study. Other studies have not reproduced those results. But that was 29,000 children. That was perhaps an outlier. So I've concentrated more on the 300 feet, knowing that, for instance, if the Draper study is correct, the school I'm talking about is at this time just on the borderline of danger. I've measured the EMF, and it's 1.8 to 2.4, depending upon the surge and demand on the line at the time.
Now the school that you're talking about, if they were to add to it the Northern Pass, so there's already a danger now, and this is on the PSNH right away. Okay, so that's an AC line. It's not even a tower. Okay, it's not even the towers that they're going to be putting up with the DC lines. And this is why this is important, because you would also mention that there could be a greater effect when you combine the two lines. Am I correct?
Yes. With what is proposed, the AC line, the high voltage AC line, is going to be moved to the side of the right-of-way. Initially, the towers proposed were new ones were going to be 90 to 130 feet. Now, this is for a high voltage DC, direct current line, which by itself does not cause much electromagnetic field. However, these DC towers, as is in the literature and the Hydro-Quebec literature, do not have to be tall. A DC line, one of the advantages is that the tower can be made shorter.
Okay.
So why does Northern Pass or PSNH, Hydro-Quebec want them taller? And I think it's reasonable to assume that they may want to add, when they're established, if ever established, add extra transmission lines on. And they legally do not have to tell the owners of the easement on the right-of-way, well, the community, but they don't have to inform them of additional lines. There's no legal obligation.
Because they're not adding more towers.
No.
Okay.
The towers are up.
Yeah.
So I think if they're going to make them taller, now if they make them taller, then you've got an AC line next to a DC line. They're married on the right-of-way, maybe with other lines coming out, AC or DC. And there is a concern in some parts of the country and in the electric industry that there would be a hybridization, an augmentation of the EMF. So that will then increase on the sides of the right-of-way the milligauss, and will put those children I talked about probably at risk.
Okay, and it's more than one school it's going to be passing near, and over homes, probably with some young children. And I find this interesting because I think it's a given that once the Northern Pass goes through, they're just going to add to it. I mean, that's been from the very beginning, and that's why I've been concerned about this whole project.
I totally agree. Quebec is probably the poorest province in Canada. It needs the money. It has massive plans, 571 dams, multiple rivers, the Plan Nord that is developing, good to develop, and they want the American market. They need the money. They really don't care about us. They'll woo us, but they need the money. And they're going to, once they get their points across the border, it's going to start coming down and coming down. And then, of course, like OPEC, they can adjust the rates. A foreign nation will be adjusting the rates, and we will have little say.
The other thing that concerns me about that, too, is if they have all the power to turn on and off the power, they can actually deny us power.
Yes, I don't know if that would ever become a reality, because they do need us financially.
That's true. It's a thought.
But I think what does concern me is that if the terrorist action, through cyber attacks, through central control in Quebec, or even coming across our porous northern border, could knock these transmission lines or interrupt the supply. And then, of course, like we're seeing now with the current flooding in New York City, blackout, almost getting to the point of civil unrest, danger, health, no circulation lights, no traffic lights, compressors at home not being able to function. So this is a concern, is the reliability of the line coming down. And in the United States, we have made a very concerted effort to be secure. It is well known by us and the Canadians that their security is not up to par.
Okay.
They've admitted it.
Okay. So now, have we covered most of the health effects you want to cover? Because I wanted to also talk about the possibility of these towers going over, and then how we can bury them and how that saves us from the electromagnetic.
I think it might be important just to mention that because there's a lack of causation, we've got association. We've got the studies that show an increased chance of children developing leukemia. That other countries and states in the United States have used the precautionary principle and prudent action policy, which essentially states that with the lack or absence of robust science, that if there's a reasonable suspicion of a danger, for example, look what happened to us with asbestosis, Agent Orange, Gulf War syndrome, DDT. All in the beginning we had an association but no causation, and now we know, of course, there was a causation. We should not just be prepared to watch our children develop the facts that we need to stop this now. We have a reasonable suspicion that there's going to be a danger. And so, if I'd like to just briefly go through the different countries that have done avoidance.
Okay.
Spain is the prohibition of power lines near residential areas and schools. Sweden, no houses within 330 feet of high voltage lines. No schools near them. United Kingdom the same. Australia, no schools must not be near power lines. Italy, they use a length of 4 hours a day. If children are going to be more than 4 hours a day near a line, that line must be diverted. And then Connecticut, very strongly and very thoroughly, has recommended burying lines near schools. California, a lot of studies in California pointing to the precautionary principle, prudent action, and keeping them away from schools. And Colorado, Illinois, Oregon, Utah, all following the prudent avoidance and diverting lines away from, because we have to distance ourselves from the source to protect the children. And I think that was something I hope that the current committee will take up and follow through with.
Okay, so there are so many progressive countries and states right now So the evidence is out there, and other places are listening. Why won't New Hampshire? Actually, I believe our Senate are actually trying to help us with this.
I
And I
do
want to
too.
credit Jeannie Forrester and some of the other reps like Larry Rappaport.
Yes.
They actually are trying to help us with this, and I just can't say enough good things. But they don't have all the power to do that. So I think shoring up our laws to bury the line, which we're going to discuss next, why it's so important to bury the line and why that does insulate the electromagnetic frequencies. So there's a new technology, it's called ABB, HVDC, it's the ABB company, but it's HVDC light technology, and that's what we've been sharing with the Senate. So that is supposed to shield most all of the electromagnetic rays, correct?
Yes.
Right. And just in the commission meeting that we had down in Concord the other day, they had somebody who tried to dispute that. So let's talk about why that information may not be correct, because he wasn't an expert.
There was an individual, I understand, from the Department of Health and Human Services. I think also he may have been connected with DES, who felt that just burying the line would increase our risk.
Right.
That we were, in fact, rather than distancing ourselves, we were making this distance shorter. With previous underground technology, which is a pipe with a dielectric fluid inside and then transmission line, there was perhaps a halving of the electromagnetic field. So you wouldn't want to just stand above it and stay there all day. This ABB HVDC light, I understand, I'm not an electrical engineer, but from what I hear and read about it, there's no EMF at the surface. And with horizontal drilling, with the ability to go down and then go horizontally, and as suggested, maybe the soft shoulders of highways like Maine, and we've seen it happen in New York State, where I think this would be technically feasible, and I'm not an economist, there are economists working on this. The initial capitalization will be rapidly resolved over the years. And of course, all the dangers that we can get from overhead transmission lines like we're seeing in New York State at the moment. And as the line crosses over the right-of-way over the White Mountain Forest, those tall towers, ice-laden, as the climate changes, forest fires, maybe in the future, certainly power interruptions and all the attendant health problems you can get with that.
Right. And I think that the attention to climate change is important, especially with these superstorms that are now beginning to come to us
yes.
more regularly.
That's significant. And, apart from the security, I think that's another reason to bury these lines, apart from the visual pollution. If you look at the side effects, the health effects, I think a lot of people, if this line ever goes through, secondary and perhaps in the scale of things not that important but still important, it's going to be very difficult for people to live with looking at these lines going down and just being reminded of the power of the oppressor, the corporation, our inability to react when it's appropriate to react even with significant evidence and against the will of the people. These things go through.
Against the will of the people, that is absolutely true. We have this regulatory process where we are allowed to go and speak, and those are the scoping comments, and there were no positive comments, as if you've probably been to them and to see that. And so we're thinking that we have this voice and that they're actually going to listen to us. And then you find out as it goes along that nothing has changed, and it's business as usual. You had your say, great, see you later.
I think it's true, and it's very sad because I think way back somebody said that regulators just make it appear to look good.
Yes.
And so they make fools of us. Or could make fools of us, but not, I don't think, in this situation.
Right. And I think what's happening now are people like you who are going up and you're talking to the Senate and you're educating people around the state. I believe you've been speaking about this subject, and working with our state government. I think is our best bet.
Yes.
In changing this, but you have to change the laws.
Yes.
To force them to bury the line.
And as you said, Jeannie Forrester is leading that commission, Madam Chairman of that, and I think it's tremendous, her effort.
I agree.
But we all need to speak up. We cannot just shrug our shoulders and say it's a done deal. Everybody cannot believe that there's a small core group that's going to do it. We all have to be involved.
We all have to
Our
be involved.
voice has to be heard. And as we heard in this election cycle, and future election cycles if necessary.
Absolutely. And we have to be careful too, because there's so much of a spin. The corporations have so much money to advertise that I think they think if they just keep saying the same points over and over again, we'll eventually believe it.
Mm-hmm.
And they're friends with some of the media outlets, as you know. Union leader.
It's a complex, layered situation. But we need to speak out. I think it's interesting that Northern Pass sent out brochures, little glossy brochures where moose were nibbling at leaves and children were playing in parks. But they had a myth section where they were dispensing with myths. But what was very interesting was that they never mentioned health.
Right.
They never mentioned it.
They don't mention it.
They don't, and I think the burden of proof is on Hydro-Quebec and Northern Pass to convince us that there are no health risks.
I don't think they can do it.
I don't believe they can do it. Certainly after millions and millions of dollars, recent decades of research, there is a strong association of particularly leukemia in children.
And that is the last thing we need.
Last thing. Not one extra case. What these children go through with leukemia, and even though the percentage cure rate is much higher than it used to be, they have to stay on chemotherapy. They can have relapses, all the infection things. These children suffer.
Have you seen any cases yourself?
Yes.
Okay.
I was a general practitioner in the past, and I have looked after cases of leukemia.
More information on this subject, or you would like to watch this again, you can go to our website at knonorthernpass.org, where we will post this link. And also, if you have questions, you can write me at supportus@knonorthernpass.org. And if you have those questions, feel free to write in, and we'll see if we can't